Right. Good evening, everyone. I see many people already connected, so I think we're ready to start. I wanted to welcome all of you. I'm Audrey Farou. I'm the co-chair of the FACC Women in Business Committee, and I'm really delighted to have you here this evening and with us to have this Meet the Executive event hosted by the FACC of New York and featuring our guest speaker, Martine Ferland, President and Chief Executive Officer of Mercer. Martine, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is a real pleasure to welcome you. For those of you here who are new to the FACC of New York, just a quick word on the mission of the chamber. It's really to promote all the bilateral economic relations between France and the United States and to facilitate meaningful thought leadership exchanges as well as networking opportunities between and for all our members. The New York chapter counts approximately 1,000 members in very diverse sectors, ranging from consulting, banking, retail, luxury, tech startups, and beyond. And maybe a few words about the Women in Business Committee. I mean, there is not a better time to have a conversation about women in business right now, I feel. You know, we all know that, you know, COVID-19 and the crisis has been, you know, affecting many people, many employees. But I was just reading a study actually that was issued just a week ago about the impact of this crisis on women in the workplace, and you know, it looks like, you know, the impact on the employees is very consistent. Where, you know, whether it's anxiety over layoff, it's, you know, burnout, it's childcare, or, you know, any other homeschooling responsibilities. I see some faces smiling on the screen, and I'm sure, you know, many people are going through this right now. But it's also, you know, about the impact on physical and mental health. So you name it. But according to this study, it was actually quite striking to see that women, in particular, working mothers, seem to be suffering disproportionately through this crisis as they struggle to balance, you know, jobs and family. And so there were just three findings from this study that I thought were, you know, important to highlight. First, women are leaving the workforce at higher rates than men this year, which is something we've not seen over the past 5 years. Second, 1 in 3 mothers may be forced to scale back or to opt out. And 3, as many as 2 million women in the US are considering taking a leave of absence or leaving the workforce altogether. So this is quite striking. This is quite alarming. And this means that, you know, the potential impact will be that we will have less women in the workforce, but also actually less women in leadership positions, and probably also far fewer women on the track to be future leaders. So yes, it's alarming, but at the same time, I feel like it's, you know, it's a pivotal moment, and it's a great opportunity for companies, you know, our members here, but also women in business to, you know, be part of the conversation, to see what is the opportunity, and to really develop a new framework to retain women, but also continue to create opportunities for women in the future. So this is really why the Women in Business Committee is, you know, very committed more than ever to continue their mission of developing opportunities for women in business. Think for the long term, come up with, you know, creative solutions to support women in business. So we are actually celebrating today the launch of our inaugural mentoring program. And so you know, really just want to take a minute to thank and recognize all the mentors and the mentees. Many of them are connected and attending tonight, so welcome and thank you. And also to thank all the members of the Women in Business Committee. I think we're all of us here tonight. We have our co-chair, Adriana Agbo, Marine Debucco, Ariane Dagan, Deborah Nilsson, Thais Roda, Deb Van Hayden, and Amanda Dubuis, as well as Caitlin Health from the FACC, who is the driving force of this committee. So thank you all for what you do. And I am now pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Martine Ferland, who again is President and CEO of Mercer, a global leader in human resources consulting and the world's largest outsourced asset manager with over $300 billion of outsourced assets under management. Martine also serves as the vice chair of Marsh and McLennan companies, which is Mercer's parent. Before being named to her current role, Martine served as Mercer's group president and was responsible for leading regions and global business solutions. And before that, Martine served as president of Mercer's Europe and Pacific region, delivering consistent, profitable growth and leadership in the institutional investment space and a strengthened market position through strategic acquisitions. Prior to Mercer, Martine spent 25 years with Willis Towers Watson, where she held leadership positions in North America and Asia. And Martine earned a bachelor's degree in actuarial science from Laval University in Quebec, and is a fellow of the Society of Actuaries and the Canadian Institute of Actuaries. So thank you again, Martine, for joining. We're going to start in a minute. Before that, just 2 words of housekeeping before we start. So as you can see, we have everyone on video and everyone have video capabilities, which is great because we like to see everyone's faces. The discussion with the panel will last approximately 40 minutes. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So please, raise your hand and I will call on participants to ask their question. And when I call on you, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Now with that, I will turn it over to Martine for a few introductory remarks, and the panel discussion will be led by Deb and Amanda. Thank you, everyone.
Merci beaucoup, Audrey. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm a little bit of a impostor because I'm not French. I'm French Canadian. So I'm very pleased to be here with you tonight. I'm based in New York. And I think Audrey has given you a little bit of my trajectory over the last many years that I'd care to count at this point in my career. But thank you so much to the FACC for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here and have that dialogue with you and see what's on your mind in this very exceptional year where, as Audrey said, it's impacted women in quite a it's impacted everyone, but women in particular, in a way that might have consequences that we need to watch for over the coming years and redouble our efforts to make sure the representation is really truthful to the representation of women in our communities. So I was asked to say just a few words. I'll be very quick. As you saw my career, I'm from STEM, so it's and I have a daughter who's an engineer. So I think that's very important to support women who are coming from mathematical, finance, and science backgrounds. And I've worked in many countries and continents, lived in many continents in my life, so it's part of who I am, and probably part of who I was, because I was always very curious about other cultures and everything. So it led me to accept some moving positions that gets me here in front of you tonight. So with that, I've also 3 kids grown up. I'm a grandma, so I have a granddaughter, a 1-year-old darling. At the time, one thing that I've done that is a little bit outside of the typical CEO track is I did spend some time at home when they were very little, and we also had a cat, a dog, so it was a full household. And I did freelancing before the word, I think, was quite popular, and even before email existed, so kind of giving you my age here. So I'm happy to take on any topics and any variant of that journey, which I think is very you own it. It's personal to you, to your own set of values and ambition, and what, you know, what makes you happy and what makes you tick. So I would just start with a caveat that the choices I've made were my own. I needed to make them for myself and my family, just because of the scheme of things I had in my own head. And the key here for me is to be true to your own values and know yourself as most important. So anything that I can say, I'm not saying it's good for everyone. I'm just saying that's how I did it.
Thank you. Audrey, should I start? Okay. All right, Martine, thank you. It's Deborah Vanderhayden, and Amanda Dubai and I are going to go through some things we'd love to talk to you about today. I guess I'd like to start where you just ended, which is, you know, with a history of moving a lot to various countries and launching your career. And I guess, especially since this is the French American Chamber, and we have a lot of people here who do work in places where they didn't necessarily grow up. It would be really interesting to hear how perhaps some of those choices were presented to you, or you made them, and how you managed to transition to other countries and work through the language and the culture, and maybe with your family responsibilities as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting as a question, because I know there are many people on this call that have similar experiences, and we could compare and contrast for sure. I truly believe that you need to have that in you. It's difficult to move away from your roots, your family, your friends. Depends what age you start doing the nomad thing or the expatriation. But I think in any case, there's somewhat of a mindset that you put yourself in as you start doing this. Someone very early on told me that when you move from a culture, I moved the first time from Montreal to New York 20 years ago, and someone had told me, when you move to a culture that you perceive as similar, you're annoyed by all the differences. And when you move to a culture, say you go to Asia and you move to China, for me as a Canadian, you expect everything to be different, and therefore you're comforted by all the similarities. And it's a question of perception, it's a question of mindset. That's very much what we found as a family. But we also found that we were made for this. We really were curious and interested. And that's another element, and I don't know about you all, but to my point about your own values and knowing your own self, I'm not a big proponent of over planning your career, because I think life throws you all kinds of challenges and twists and turns, and it's enough if you can see 3-4 years ahead, and I think it's a bit of a waste of time. But you need to know your own self, so that when opportunities come, you can recognize them and you can think about whether that fits what you had in mind for yourself on a broader basis. And therefore, when the first opportunity to move abroad came, the first thing we did was a family huddle. And we were very comfortable, 3 young teenagers, and with lots of space, being asked to move to New York City, the big place. Very exciting, but at the same time very daunting. And the family was all up for it. So we said, let's go. Everybody around me was saying, "You're crazy. You don't approve good teenagers. you don't do that." But that's another element of how we've moved and did all these things. Is I'm not very risk averse, but at the same time, there's always a plan B. If this doesn't work, then what? And you always, most of the time, realize that the then what is quite a smooth landing. So, okay, then what? We'll construct something else. We'll come back. We'll do something. So, the last point on having the fantastic opportunity that I have had to work with so many different cultures and so many different places is, I would credit my first move to New York 20 years ago, when I actually was asked to lead a group of global consultants. So consultants in America that worked with multinationals in America, but for their assets all outside the US. And therefore we got to connect to the whole world and work with practitioners all over the planet. And our own team had to be diverse from a racial, ethnicity, geographic standpoint to be able to service those multinationals. And that's where it really struck me, the value of diversity, the value of people coming in with different experiences, different background, bringing their thoughts to bear. And I thought, I don't recall that there was a group of 80 consultants at the time, such a richness of conversation and outcomes that would never have been achieved by people too like-minded or with the same type of experiences. So for me, that was the real first aha moment from a diversity, the value of diversity.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you so much, Martine. That's really valuable information. I like how you mentioned that some people were so surprised by your choices and maybe hesitant on some of your choices to make these kinds of moves. But on the other hand, how did you actually find mentors and find people who were actually helping you make those choices? And can you tell us a little bit more about how you manage that network throughout your career, throughout all those places and continents, to manage your growth and to continue growing?
Yeah, well, I think mentors come in all shapes and form. You find them in places that you might not have anticipated. It's not always through formal programs. And I have to say, I've never had a formal mentor until quite late in my career. And I've never had long relationship. It was more troubleshooting at certain point in time, and I was looking for something very specific. So for example, when I took the mental CEO in March 2019, a couple of months ahead of that, I knew this was going to be done and announced. And I started working with someone who had a similar pattern to me in terms of what type of role they were coming from into a CEO role as a mentorship, just for that transition. Mentoring. So it was very specific to me. But as I said, being in consulting, many of my clients have been mentors over the years. Very often when I was a younger consultant, they would have been more experienced, and even though they were clients, it was quite interesting that I wanted to make a difference and bring impact to their business, but they also you build quite good, strong relationship of trust in these advisorship type of roles, and my clients became good advisors to me in my career by working in that way. So for me, it was more. There's lots of luck on my path. I don't think you get to big leadership roles like this without a good amount of luck. I mean, hard work and talent for sure at the base. I don't want to be, facetious about things, but lucky to have good bosses as well that almost act as mentor, that really want to sponsor you, to make you visible, to give you experiences and projects. And it's a two-way road, because on the other side is to be very open and candid about what you're after, what you're interested in, what's your ambition, what's your aspirations. I've never been afraid of having those open conversations, because then when you trust the boss, when you trust the mentor, something comes along and they think of you because they know it's in your roadmap somewhere, somehow. And I know I've had some conversations like this over the years with mentees, because I've taken lots of mentees over the last many years. And I would say, you need that openness. And some people have told me, oh, I'm afraid of telling my boss that I'm thinking of, say, having a mobility experience, like working elsewhere, because they'll think I'm not dedicated to today. And I think that's a wrong thinking. You can certainly have that kind of a conversation and open up. It's not to say you're absolutely committed to what you're doing today, but you're not, you're smart, and you're thinking about, how do I grow? How do I grow my skills? How do I continue to make a bigger and bigger contribution in the role that I have, or in the future, prepare for the future role over time?
That makes sense. And I hope this message resonates with all our mentees and mentors today for this program, which is a bit more formal than maybe the first mentoring experiences you had in your life. But hopefully they'll feel the same openness and trust and ability to discuss future projects while still being committed to what they're doing today.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I think those mentee-mentor official pairing and relationship, they're good too. I just had more informal ones than formal ones in my own career, but I truly believe that there's a lot of value, and there's a lot of value for both the mentor and the mentee.
Yeah, definitely a sharing experience there.
Yeah, learning how somebody else is thinking about issues, working through the issues. It's interesting, anecdotally, I don't know if it's a question that will come later, but I've mentored lots of high performance up-and-comers, women and men. And we end up working on very much similar topics. How do I delegate more? How do I have vision? How do I keep myself strategically inclined? How do I get too involved in the day-to-day? So the questions end up in the things that we work on similar. But I mean, not to belabor some traits, but very often the women would come to me starting the conversation by saying, oh, I'm not good at X. Can we talk about that? And the men would come in and say, I'd love to become a partner in this firm. How do I do this? In the end, we work on the exact same thing.
Yeah, Martine, you're getting into a topic that kind of transitions to our next question, which is confidence, right? Women come in perhaps with less confidence than men. And so I think we'd love to hear, I always say, you know, hindsight is 20/20, and diving in and confronting a challenge or just surviving a bad experience is the best confidence builder sometimes. Can you share with us an experience that you had that was challenging, and how you worked through it, and how it helped your career?
No, it's a good point. And before we go there, I want to make sure that, to me, the diversity in our own experiences and how we have approached things for whatever reason, the societal pressures, the stereotypes that we were raised with, whether men, women, whatever, they make us who we are. And I think it's very important because, you know, a few years back, and even Sheryl Sandberg's book is really good on Lean In, it's interesting, but there's a point where stop fixing the woman. So because the women bring a different way sometimes of thinking, of doing, of acting, of behaving, just because of all these societal pressure and the different ways that we were raised. And I think that's the beauty, that's the value. So there's a point there. I'm not sure it's, yeah, and there's generalization as well. Not every woman lacks confidence, but yeah, maybe they're straight. No smoke without fire, for sure. So you're right, and I'm quite sure, you know, there's so many people who say, if you don't fail, you haven't tried hard enough. You have to learn through these experiences, and I've plenty. And it's much more how you react to it. I'll tell you, my first true leader P&L role was to take on the Montreal office leadership. I was a practitioner, I was a consultant in the field, and I had done a little bit of people management and a little bit of recruiting, and I've touched a few things, and I was given the opportunity to be the leader of this office, about 200 people, and the first couple of months in the job, the year before, we had lost a big client, and of course the results year over year looked awful, and I took it all on me that I was not doing enough, that it was all me, my fault, why am I not able to turn this around quicker, and I lost sleep. It was not pleasant, and it took me a little bit of a while. I was young, to understand that it's a team here. It's a team effort. Don't try to do it all by yourself. I mean, there's a point where you'll be stronger with the strength of everyone around you. And I have to admit, I learned it a bit the hard way. I learned it quickly, but I learned it the hard way because I took it all myself for a few months, and I thought I was not cut for this, and blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to redo the numbers sometimes with and without that damn client that had left out. I mean, all kinds of shenanigans and stupidity that you just learn how to manage a P&L, how to take it on the how to leverage your team, how to build for the future. You know, there was so many learnings in that short experience of taking a business that might not have been on the right footing to start with. So that's one of a few.
Thank you. That makes, I mean, again, that resonates with the stereotypes about women wanting to solve it all versus, again, stereotyping again, but wanting to try to solve it all and learning to take responsibility for what is your responsibility, and also knowing how to let go, or also share blame and success. And I think that leads to our next question, which is, now, of course, you're on a different level in your career, and you mentioned the benefits of diversity. So what differences do you think you bring with your diversity, first as a woman, of course, because I think it's in interest for our audience, but also, you know, in a more complex vision from all your experiences that make you quite unique in your convictions and your inspiration, I guess. So can you share a bit more about that? What leader you are, what what you?
Okay, well, it'd be better to ask my team what they think. But like presuming what I come across as, but you know, it's to me, it's interesting. I think this blend as a woman of empathy and economics, and I'm using these words very deliberately. When I took my CEO role, we had the same CEO for 7 years, so it was time for a refresh, a turn of the page, a bit of a recentering, a bit of a asking ourselves, who are we? What are we bringing to the world? What's our identity? What differentiates us? And I've done some work in refreshing our brands and our commitments, our values. And we've done quite a lot of, you know, focus groups of our clients, of our colleagues, of our leadership, and interviews of me as well as to how I saw how we could be successful that way. And we came with this empathy and economics. When we fuse both, we get the maximum impact. And the idea was, know your client, care to solve their problem and understand their priorities, understand what makes them and their organization successful, what they're looking to achieve. And by knowing that and caring for that, then bring that back, that's your empathy, bring that back to your knowledge, your expertise. We're professionals, we have long experience and track record in our fields, and it's when you fuse the two that you get maximum impact. It's not by thinking you know it all and assuming what your client is needing, but at the same time is, I mean, you can't just stay at the relationship level, you need to run a business. And that's how we found our differentiator, and I think it's very much me as well, because I think I've influenced that dialogue quite a lot, and also coming from the industry. And geez, we pegged that down in the summer of 2019, and it really resonated with our colleagues and clients as we continue to develop what it meant. And then we hit COVID just early, not even a year in my role, and this refresh identity that we had and the intrinsic value we brought, and we activated that muscle like you cannot believe. I mean, it was all about empathy for people. Like, are they safe? Are they healthy? Can they protect themselves? Can they protect their family? Is everything all right? Okay, now can we equip them to be productive, to continue to hold their role in their job? And then very quickly, what do our client need? Are their needs changing? Do they have the right health coverage around the world? I mean, that's what we do, health coverage, wealth, pension plans. How is that volatility when the market crashed in March? What can you do for clients? What is the new question they're asking themselves? It was always centricity, empathy for what people were going through. And then economics, because we had a business to run through that. We had shareholders. We had to balance out the short term, the long term, the safety of people, which was first and foremost. And my CFO is a woman too, so we said cash is queen. So we need to make sure that we were keeping the business afloat and paying the salaries and paying the rents as we serve the clients and their new needs and their evolving needs. And that has served us very much. And I would say that's probably one of the defining ways that I've been able to lead. And I'm not sure, I think there's a lot of men who are empathetic, that's not a point, but I think it came very naturally to me, to my team. My team is, there's 12 of us, there's 42% women on that team, and there's a varied group of, like from an ethnicity point of view, we're very, very diverse as well, and that really helps us balance and connect better to the situation out there.
That's definitely a differentiator. Definitely men are empathetic as well, but I think the ability to actually mention empathy as part of your leadership mark is very strong, and using it in a positive way and not a negative way. So definitely a differentiator in my perspective, for sure. And I think your point about COVID and the challenge that represents leads to the next question we had that was going to raise.
Yeah, I'm curious though. I want to loop back to your comment about having 42% women executives in your company. Is that part of what you've been able to achieve, or was that existing at Mercer before? And how do you find you can actively increase that and engage that? What are you doing that's unique, perhaps?
Yeah, where 42% is my own global leadership team, 12, and then you go all senior women that we would grade level, see what we consider senior levels is also 42%. So it took us some time to get there, but we you might be aware at Mercer 8-9 years ago we realized we had all the insight, the data to help our clients measure their flows, how they were hiring, how they were promoting, who they were losing. So we've expertise to analyze that. And we decided to really dig deep and have a body of research as to what policies and programs actually help those flows of be more gender equal. And what policies and programs, how did you do upstream so that you got these statistics and outcome downstreams? And we call that program When Women Thrive, because it was when women thrive, society thrive, when women thrive, business thrives. And we've done lots of research as well in the correlation between performance of teams. So for example, for us in my business, we have analyzed when we have a diverse client team, we win project more often than not. Actually, from a team that has at least one senior woman on it versus a team that doesn't, they will win 20% more time than the team that's not diverse. So there's definitely a driver of performance behind the diversity. And because we've done all this research in the correlation of the programs that work and the programs that don't work, because you can do a lot of things in diversity, equity, and inclusion that is good talk, it's on the shelf, everybody's happy that we have it, but you're not seeing the flows, you're not seeing the outcome. So we've done lots of work to correlate the two, and we've kind of drank our own Kool-Aid over the last 8 years. It was not, Deb, it was not 42% when I started with this program 8 years ago, and me and a few others alongside. And we've seen the success, absolutely. And there's a bit of a snowball effect. I'm sure you're all familiar with the 30% Club that started in the UK. We were amongst the first signatories of the CEOs pledging that they would get their management teams to at least 30% women. Because there's psychological studies that would say, you know, 1 is the odd one, 2 is just a little pair that just hang out for, you know, look out for each other, and then 3 is just you become yourself, and there's a snowball effect. So it was very important to move the representation so that you get that kind of sentiment where you were asking me, you know, you're the woman, your experience as a woman. But I'll tell you, when there's 42% of you, it's not about women and men. It's about each and every one of you brings something that is specific to your values, your talent, your expertise, your intrinsic ways of doing and qualities.
Very refreshing.
It can be done. It's the thing. I mean, we're not at 50%, which is the holy grail, of course. We are at 50% in more junior ranks, but I think to be at 42% in senior ranks is quite exceptional. And it absolutely can be done. I mean, accountability of leaders, tone from leaders, but also accountability, measuring the flows, the ins, the outs, the why people leave, the being honest with yourself, looking these numbers in the eye and saying, okay, it's not working. We can talk a good talk on our D&I program, but the numbers are not there to support us. What are we doing wrong? Where is it not working? And training is good, but there's nothing like experiencing it. So really the mentoring, the sponsoring, the giving the visibility, the experience, and going upstream, going at the roles. What we've done is workforce analytics, and you look at which role did a person like me or like you, Deb, or anybody else that have, some roles, some senior roles in the company, whether it is client-facing, function, whatever it is, what roles did they have on their journey in? And then you can look at the representation of women all along the way, because you don't want to promote people that don't have the experience or expertise. It's not good for them, not good for your business, not good for your clients. And therefore, you need to go and work really upstream. And that's my example of the client team. People management role for us are an indicator of promotion. Being the more senior person on a client team, being in a pitch team when we pitch for new mandates. So every business has these roles that are different, but that correlates to faster promotion. And you need to focus on that, because honestly, if you just do, it has to be said, you have to over-index the change. If you don't over-index, you'll just reproduce what you have and you'll never get there. And that's one of the reasons why it's so slow. It's hard, but
what, reverting back to COVID, what did you do differently in the business to help you navigate? And also, I think we'd love to hear your thoughts about, so many businesses are struggling. What are some of the key things that companies need to do to maintain connectivity of their employees during this time, since still many are working from home?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, there's many questions in there. What we did differently as a leadership team is, as I said earlier, very quickly pivot to people and what they needed to be safe and productive. And I think you've seen so many businesses do that so well this year. It was very inspiring and comforting to see. From a management of the business, I would say it was managing by our time horizons. So always, and I said, holding two truths and making sure you kept an eye to the long term as you made sure you were fine for the short term. There's always a tension in public companies in that way, but it was exacerbated by the crisis this year. And I would say keeping the faith in the future and an eye on the outcome. So we chunked up our time, and then we started scenario planning. I think there was many of us doing that because we called it plan for the worst and fight for the best. And we're in an industry that was, some projects have been stopped or halted because of the need to preserve cash, the difficulty in the economy and everything. Not hit as hard as some of the industries that we all know about. So I would say we're in a okay to good rather than okay to bad, if you look at that. But still, there's lots of headwinds, and we have our revenue will not be as good as last year. So we had to really work around that. We pledged very, very early on that as long as we were in the thick of the crisis, that we were all still figuring it out, all jobs would be secured. So we're in that camp of company. We had the luxury of doing it. I totally understand not all industries could have that luxury, but we decided to do that. And what we did is went really hard at all discretionary expenses to be able to get until such time as we could say, okay, there's a new normal here that we know it's virus may still be here, and we're definitely in the long haul, and that's the mindset that we're working with our employees on, to say it'll be over one day, but we don't know when. So let's equip ourselves. So we've equipped ourselves to be comfortable virtually, to work well. We follow government and local regulations and dictates and we're very respectful of our employees' health and personal circumstances. We're having lots of conversation about the hybrid model of the future, in terms of we're a knowledge worker at Mercer, and therefore it's relatively easy for us, but to work from home or to work remotely. But at the same time, what do you miss? You miss the energy of the relationship, of the meeting the people, the brainstorming, and even the difficult conversation, conflict resolution. Not easy to do. Brainstorming, I think it's been quite documented. And therefore we're just bracing ourselves. It's the long haul. We can call that a ultra marathon, needed to stay really fit, take care of each other. So we've deployed tons of resources for employees to help with homeschool, to help with kids. So we had a part on our intralink called Kids Corner, where you had colleagues who were reading stories to young kids in lifetime, and parents who were exhausted could park the kids in front of the Zoom for a 15 minutes and hear a nice story told with a thick German accent or a French accent. It was around the world. It was quite cute, actually. So that's just anecdotally, but we've done lots of things like this, and we continue, because we continue to equip ourselves to be very efficient virtually and remote, because it'll be in and out, and we're present in 70 countries. So that's one thing. We decided that it was a local thing. So we provided framework and guidelines, but then local leadership empowerment is to decide within that framework what were they ready for. And now we're seeing, for example, our Paris office, it was quick out of the gate, come back to the office, 33% of them as soon as early July. And now they're slowly going back home, of course, as I'm sure you're all following the news. Ireland this morning got into complete shutdown again. So the flexibility, the agility, speed over perfection was a mantra that we said. I mean, we're old 75-year-old firm. We like to do things really, really well. And here there was a bit of the enemy of the good, as it is usually, but more so than usual. We were able to accelerate some things on the digital platforms. For example, we have a health digital platform where that was really helpful to help clients deploy telehealth medicine and make that available there in Intralink really rapidly to clients. So making use of our digital solutions, that just accelerated. And therefore now I'm sure many of you were looking at this and saying, okay, what have we done during the crisis, which is not over by all stretch of imagination, but that we absolutely want to carry forward? How do we not snap back into some of the old habits? So that speed, that agility, that connectivity, the facility that it is. Just you want an expert from Hong Kong to talk to you about the situation over there, to an American client who has operations there, easy. No need to travel, no need to time zone and delays. You can just zoom in, zoom out. And at the other end of Zoom, though, I think what's emerging is technique as well to continuously manage your day-to-day life in this crazy little Brady Bunch. Sorry, I have some American roots as well. I don't know if that resonates, but the tiles on the screen there can be very tiring. So how do you get away from that? How do you vary your day and help yourself?
That resonates definitely in terms of what can you keep from your COVID reaction that's actually long-term. I think some of the things you mentioned, such as supporting your employees' flexibility, their ability to work remotely, all of this does tie in this goal of allowing for diversity in your company, because this is also tackling some of the challenge linked to different people with different realities that they're managing in their personal life. And I think this leads to our final question. We have just a couple more minutes before opening the conversation to the Q&A. But it's overall, you touched a little about how you focused on the data to create more diversity, and you've also supported your teams during this crazy time, which I think will help on the long term maintaining that diversity. Very data-oriented approach. But how did you cultivate the diversity culture in your organization? How did you make other people understand how important it is and how important it is to the company?
Yeah, I touched on that quickly. Accountability from leaders, accountability from the very top, and transparency in the position. So we've always declared respect, diversity, and inclusion. Of course, equity. It's embedded in all of our processes, and it's also part of our language. It's all parts of our goals. So it's everywhere, but it's done from the top, and it's the actions, it's the way you behave yourself as a leader. And of course, in the US, with the racial unrest and the social injustice that came to the fore, that just got elevated. And honestly, I mean, we talked a lot about gender today, but what we've realized is all our efforts on gender, we kind of squeezed out race a little bit. It's not like it was in our stats, but we were so focused, and it's not like there was unfair practices, so like in a deliberate fashion, but did we pay enough attention? And we then declared very quickly, very, very forcefully, like so many other corporations. I mean, there was a real lightning rod, not that these issues are new, but there was just a confluence of things. And I think COVID just also exacerbated and put a shining light on the issue that no one could avert their eyes at all. I mean, the social media also showing it in real time. It was so shocking and so sad, and I truly believe, I mean, I've lived in this country long enough, in and on and off. There's definitely a sentiment of a real change coming, and so we've been very vocal about this, and it enabled us to look at actually strategies we had used to improve our gender representation, and say, pretty sure the experience is different. We're not saying the experience that a Black person in the US, for example, is what they're experiencing is different from what a woman in a workplace will experience, but it's still an underrepresented group, having to fit in a majority, no ill intended, but some biases that are just intrinsic to human nature. And we looked at the strategies and we said, you know what, these strategies will also work. So we rolled up our sleeve this summer, and we've recommitted, and actually this mentoring and sponsorship that was so efficient for us, effective for us, for gender, we've now applied it to people of color in the same way that our top 150 leaders mentor now and sponsor 2 or 3 people of color across the firm, to make sure that we create that snowball effect of that 30% that I was talking about for minority representation, in the same way that we've achieved it for women. It's not that we're done on the gender balance, but we certainly can do better on race and ethnicity representation.
Okay, thank you very much. Deb, if you're okay, I think we could hand it to
Audrey, do you want to open for questions from the group?
So if everyone has a question, please raise your hand. I see people on the phone as well, so feel free to send a message so I can turn it over to you. So I'm looking at the screen. Caitlin, let me know if you see anyone raising their hand. So I'll ask a question actually in the meantime, as we're still waiting for people to react. And Martine, I'm so glad that you finished the conversation on the question of race, actually, because that's where I had a question. And I'm so happy also to hear, all the efforts that you're doing internally to, develop more inclusion, diversity also around race. So, but my question was more, after, the past few months in the US, we've seen, not only going through the health crisis and the economic crisis, we've also seen, a crisis around racial justice. And it was interesting to see that people are now expecting companies to step up and step in, and actually CEOs to take a stand. And we've seen a flood of, corporate communication and messages throughout the media. And so I was interested to hear, how this change in expectation, which we had not seen before, right? How did that affect and impact you personally as a leader? How you see your impact, the impact of your business on business and society?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first, I think this whole realization, the sadness of it and the shock of it back in June, as I said, it was not new, but for whatever reason, it just struck me. I'm just back to the US a year in, and I'm not saying it's not happening elsewhere either. Don't get me wrong on that one, but I think it was a moment of high intensity and high anxiety at that point in time as well. And you saw the sadness, you saw the fear, you saw how I have on my own leadership team, I have a Black woman, and I was having side conversations with her, and she was opening up for the first time to say how she's lived through all her career and everything. So we've had a lot of safe space conversation and learning and listening, which just got us to a point where I had a video to all colleagues around the world to say, we equate very often racism to act of utter violence. And yes, that is it. But the microaggression in the everyday of being different from the majority is also present. And with all the good intention in the world, and you think you're a good person and you're respectful, you still cross that line over and over without even realizing. And it's by putting yourself in the shoes of the other, by really, really listening and embracing the diversity and the value that diversity brings. It takes an effort. It's sometimes uncomfortable to admit that. And therefore, that's how we, as a leadership team, opened up to it and decided that we would be an agent of change, starting with our own firm. But we also consult in the field. And we've had a lot of demand doing research. So we're now doing research, advocacy, providing insight to policymakers, so that we can have an impact that goes beyond our own workplace.
Thank you. All right, so I think we have a question from Emmanuel. Emmanuel, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Emmanuel here. The question is for Martine is, could she outline 2 or 3 specific programs that were used by your company to successfully reducing its gender gap, and that could be used, by other companies like a bench, best practices?
Yeah, of course. As a good consultant, I would say it depends. It depends where you start, what your culture is. But a few fail safe ways is know your numbers and be candid about them. Measure. Don't be afraid of measuring. Even if your numbers may not be what you want to see, they are what they are. And it's only by knowing where you start and what they are that you can see if what you're doing is making a difference. So that I would say, if you don't know the numbers, if you don't measure it, then it's very, very difficult to impact, because then you don't know the forensic and where the issues are. Are they in your hiring practice? Are they in your promotion practice? Are you losing more women at certain levels than men? And why? Do you do exit interviews? So that would be one. Accountability of leaders and tone from the top. is definitely another one. So data-driven is one, measuring the flows, having the goals very clear, making it very clear it's part of your leadership role, making sure it's part of all the managers across the levels, because these things very often happen before you know it. You've hiring happening all across, and before you know it, you've hired in the same proportion as you've ever hired before. So therefore, it has to be understood, and the goals have to be very granular at the hiring manager levels. So that's another one. So data, accountability, goals, leadership's tone, and we've seen listening and training. Definitely trying to crack these unconscious biases. It's not the only thing, but it's definitely one that you have to have in your arsenal to address that and make real change. So may not be rocket science, but you need to do it year in, year out, stay true to it, measure, and pivot and address areas of because averages lie. So if you look at your averages, I've told you about 42% of my global team is 12 people, so that's easy. That average doesn't lie much, but at 42% across the firm, it may be that it's 55% in the US and it's not so good in Europe. So you have to also know your hotspots so that you can bring everybody along.
Thank you.
You can tell I'm an actuary, Emmanuel.
That helps. So I think we have time for a question from Niroda. Niroda, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thanks, Audrey. So I work in the software industry. Something you said, Martine, that really resonated is where women sometimes lack that confidence to necessarily ask for what they want or to get to that next level. And both as a woman in a very male-dominated industry, I see that also from a cultural perspective. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and culturally, women don't necessarily, and it's not forceful. So that's something I learned over a 12-year career, to ask for what I want. But my question is more about, I manage teams that are completely remote in India, and to encourage them, especially in the current situation where they're even more remote because they've now been removed from an office space where they can commiserate with other folks. How do you propose we can encourage them more, keep them more motivated when there's no interaction at all? I'm not sure if we lost Martine.
We might have lost Martine for a second.
Oh, I still see her name on the screen, but no.
No image or sounds.
Oh,
Her name is gone.
Now we lost her. Oh, wait, nope, she's back. Martine. She's further down on the screen now.
Hello, sorry, something wrong happened with the network. I don't know if it was 7 o'clock.
No worries. Niroda, did you want to ask your question again?
Very shortly.
Yes, it's mostly about how you manage completely remote teams when you have minimal interaction and they themselves have no interaction with other people with the same experience.
Yeah, what we've done is you have to train your people manager. You have to equip your people manager to and give them tricks and different ways to interact with people, and therefore quick huddle in the morning, a 5-minute phone call even. I think there's a huge fatigue coming through on Zoom, and it's because we can't just walk over to someone, it's all remote. We find ourselves very formal organizing Zoom sessions all the time, whereby you could agree to just connect on the phone in the morning and say, you know, how are you doing? So I think pivoting to outcomes as well, but I don't know if your question is about performance or mental health and
both, because I think, right, because one leads into the other automatically.
Yeah, it does. So lots of people are worried about, I don't see you, therefore do you work? We've heard that from places, and I think we need to start pivoting to outcome-driven performance measurements rather than input-driven. That was already a trend. There's so many of these trends that have just been accelerated by COVID. So I would say focusing on outcomes, having quick and very, very frequent interaction with employees, creating moments of team, moments together. It was quite popular in the very early days, cocktails and show me your dog and that kind of thing. People got a bit tired of that, but it remains that a little bit of social interaction and connection in the team is important. We said, you know, don't leave, no colleagues left behind. So you need, and train, I think there's a long list of things you can do differently. Train your people manager around those, give them confidence. They don't have to be psychologists, that's totally dangerous, no touch. But we have, I'm sure you have resources like Helpline and things online that people can access, or buddy system. We've implemented some buddy system as well. So there's many different tricks that you can deploy. Just need to educate your people manager around those as to what's their role towards their employees and what's not their role as well. That's, I think, important.
Okay, thank you, Martine.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sorry that technology was not our friend here from a technologist question.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry for other participants. We don't have time for other questions, unfortunately, but thank you so much, Martine, for joining us tonight. We're so grateful for all your insight and valuable advices to navigate throughout our careers. So big thanks to everyone, and thank you for to Amanda and Deb also for leading the panel. And finally, thank you to all the participants. It was really great to see everyone joining despite the Zoom fatigue. We all joined tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you. And a word from Caitlin, please take the time to visit the FACC website. There are plenty of very exciting events on the calendar. Look at it, ask any questions to Caitlin if you have, and register for the next event is November 17 to 19. The FACC will host our largest event of the fall, titled the One Forum. Very exciting event with 30 speakers, 300 attendees expected, with 7 panel discussions. So very exciting program to come. Again, Martine, very grateful. Nice to have you tonight, and thank you everyone. Good night.
Thank you
very much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Bye.